to your 2 o'clock lecture. As Russ said, my name is Lucy.
And my name is Nick Volpe.
And we are your cruising naturalists and wildlife photographers all the way from sunny Darwin in the Northern Territory, if you also couldn't tell from our accents as well. Now we have so much in store for you. Thank you so much for everyone who was here in our lecture yesterday and for everyone who's joining us for the first time.
So we do have a few more lectures in store if you haven't heard us talk before. We will have a day off tomorrow, but then the rest of the sea days at 2 o'clock in here, we will be doing presentations. So in a couple of days' time, we'll be exploring the Great Barrier Reef. So we'll be continuing this reef theme, going into the Great Barrier Reef. After that, we're going to start to look at some of the beautiful life on Fiji and Samoa, especially the birds. There's some amazing bird life. Then we're going to go to Sydney. So you guys will be spending a bit of time in Sydney, and we'll be talking about some of the animals that you can find, not just in the bushland around Sydney, but in the city itself. Then we'll dive into the most colourful ecosystems on Earth, tropical rainforest. And then finish it off with our own wildlife photography journey. So we've still got lots and lots of bizarre animals too to introduce everyone to as well. So we're pretty excited.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Good on everyone for showing up today to learn a little bit on your cruise as well. Now we want to prepare you for each of the ports that we'll be docking at. And so in order to do so, most importantly, the one for us is of course Sydney, close to home and close to our hearts. But we thought it would be remiss of us to, if we didn't actually prepare you properly, and there's something we really want you to start practicing today, and it's something that will help you on the ground as soon as you hit the ground running at our last port. Now you're all going to have to repeat after me, so everybody warm up your vocal cords, clear that throat, do a bit of a because I need everybody to say this very clearly. Are we ready? G'day. Oh, the naturals. All right, we're going to bring it up a step. Everybody ready? G'day, mate. You're fluent. No worries there. Keep practicing, and by the time we hit Sydney, no one will even know that you've come from abroad. Very well, my friends. Now today we're going to be, of course, diving into the realm of Finding Nemo. Whose his favourite movie is Finding Nemo? Ooh, excellent. If it's been some time since you've seen it, not to worry. They are playing it across the ship and at the Buena Vista Theatre as well. See if you can catch it while you're on board. Again, if it's been a little while since you've seen everyone on one of our most amazing Disney movies, this are some of our fishy friends who you'll become even more familiar with over the course of this presentation, and we'll talk more about the Great Barrier Reef too. But there's a little someone else.
Yeah, there's one character that is missing from the movie that is extremely important to the Finding Nemo storyline that we didn't get to meet. That is the humbled chip. Now you might be wondering, what does this chip do? It gives us probably the most iconic characters in Finding Nemo, and that is our seagull crew. Now, these seagulls, also known as silver gulls, are extremely interesting is that they have adapted so well into our Australian environment, and probably one of the most iconic sounds of an Australian summer. Can anyone do a good seagull impression? That was perfect there. Well done. Well, good impression. Maybe we should do a seagull impersonation contest somewhere on the boat.
Yeah, you don't have to practice that one before Sydney. You'll be just fine without it.
But that's right. We all remember the mine. So they're pretty raucous animals, the seagulls. That's right. So pretty funny. But I want to tell you something about silver gulls is, they're such an ingrained part of not just Australia, but there's gulls across the world. These birds did used to be actually uncommon. About 100 years ago, the early accounts of silver gulls, early bird watchers used to be amazed at the sight of a silver gull in the sky. It was a very rare sight. Now, I would love to do a study on this. I'm not sure if I have time. So if there's any young kids in the audience who want to grow up and do a PhD, this is a great topic. I want to study the rise in density of silver gull populations with the increase of fish and chip shops across Australia, because you will notice there is an absolute rapid increase. So much so, the only study in similar sense that they did to that was in Wollongong. The cool thing about these seagulls, and the only thing actually stopping their population from going to the millions, because we're offering them enough food now that their population could go into the millions, is they breed on offshore islands. And they've completely exhausted those resources. Those islands are too small now. They're at complete capacities from the seagulls. So they did a study off this tiny offshore island in Wollongong in New South Wales, where there was historically only about 2,000 pairs of seagulls would nest on that island. Currently there's 100,000 pairs. So they have completely hit capacity. They're completely spread across the country, all the way inland as well, just following those fish and chip stores. So quite amazing. They've just become such a success story in Australia. So again, such a good character, Finding Nemo. And I'll just show you a typical picture of an Australian summer. This is what we get up to in summer in Australia. This is a guy on the Gold Coast burying himself and covering himself in chips. So just a classic pastime. You'll see quite a few people doing this when you're at Sydney. So absolute classic seagulls.
We're going to try and lead you astray, absolutely not. But now back to more of our more minor characters in comparison to our lovely silver gulls here. We're going to dive back into the underwater life of Nemo and the waters below. Pardon the pun, of course. Now, the backdrop of Nemo and all of his reef fish family is, of course, what we call the tropical rainforest of the ocean. We think of the open ocean of these vast, long, featureless terrains, of which they are greatly, but 1% of the ocean floor is covered with almost 25% of the marine life, and that is held in our reef systems here. Now, they can only occur in really niche areas because they need a lot of sunlight, they need clear water, and that is so that they can photosynthesize. Now, we look at this and we call it our marine rainforest, but they're actually not plants. So our coral reefs are actually animals, and they're closely related to that of things like jellyfish and our anemones too. So they're actually sessile and they'll stay in the one place, and that is an incredible amount of real estate there because they shelter a lot of the other animals and the structures from those incredible currents, which also bring nutrients to these areas, which is fantastic, but it gives them a place to call home. And a lot of fish, like Nemo, they're always told, don't go past the safety of the reef, and that's very true. A lot of the reef fish that are born there will stay there. Now, that coral there, they actually are host to a really cool algae there called zooxanthidae, and it's a bit of a mouthful. There's a couple of mouthfuls in this presentation, but we'll go through all this together, and they photosynthesize, so they need the light, they need the water, they need the carbon dioxide, and they produce so much for the corals in terms of sugars and proteins, and they really help this place thrive, which is why we call it our tropical rainforest. Pretty cool.
We're pretty excited to show you some photos of some coral reefs in a couple of days when we do the Great Barrier Reef presentation. But for now, we'll get into Nemo.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone know who this is? And clownfish, very good as well. I'll be very concerned if nobody knew who this was up on the screen on a Disney cruise, that's for sure. So this is, of course, our Nemo, and he's an Ocellaris clownfish, which is a type of clownfish, of course. And they're called clownfish, not because they're very funny, but mostly because of those really blotchy, old, strong coloration patterns that they have across their body, much like that of a clownfish. Now, he's obviously our most lovable character, or one of our most lovable characters, in Nemo, and of course he's got that little fin to the side that has that bit of damage there, but that doesn't stop him from swimming across the ocean on his way back as well.
So clownfish are pretty amazing. So like Lucy said, I think Marlon tried to tell a few jokes in the movie to the sharks, but wasn't very successful. But there is 30 species of clownfish, so some might be a bit funnier than Ocellaris clownfish. But the distribution is quite interesting. So all those 30 species are pretty much restricted just to the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So it means the Mediterranean, Caribbean, the Atlantic Oceans, they don't have any clownfish. So the fish there, or the other sea life, don't really appreciate the comedy the clownfish bring. But like most reef fish, they're actually feeding on tiny little plankton, small crustaceans, algae, all these little things that we don't actually associate as food, or that we can't even physically see, is what a lot of these reef fish actually eat.
And our clownfish would be nothing without their anemones. Their anemones. Can everybody say that word, anemone? Anemone.
Tongue twister.
Bit of a tongue twister. But a little trick to remember it and to write it down is that Nemo is in the name as
Pretty
well,
cool.
which is a fun little trick in there too. So they live together in this amazing mutualistic relationship where these clownfish are one of the only things that can take up residence as anemones. They're nice and protected from the rest of the reef as well. They've got this beautiful mucus layer. Didn't think I'd ever say that in a sentence. Wow. Beautiful mucus layer that's almost like a barrier or a sunscreen or coat of armor against nematocysts, which are a type of stinging cell that you usually find in things like jellyfish. Our corals and our anemones are very close relatives to things like our jellyfish there. In fact, they're sort of polyps of such. So these marine anemones actually are animals again. So they have a centralized mouth. You might see where that arrow's pointing right there in the middle. That's their mouth. That's where they intake. So they're marine invertebrates. They're basically, they don't have a backbone. sometimes get food for the anemone and bring it back. When you see that happen, you'll see the anemone close over on itself and use all of their tentacles here to bring it to their mouth, and they'll use that to feed. So they have a really great relationship with one another.
Which is pretty amazing, actually. Most people, don't realise that those anemones will actually feed on other fish, which is really cool. So much so that I worked in an aquarium for 2 years, and we had lots of different clownfish, and some were very eager on feeding their anemones. So we used to put our fingers in the tank and used to let the clownfish grab and try and drag our fingers towards the anemone. So the bigger the food the possible they can provide to their anemones, because as you can see, they are pretty big, the happier their anemone would be. So they are pretty bold little fish, honestly.
Definitely. You can see that there. Sometimes if you visit aquariums, you might see some amazing colorations like this. Generally, we can't see into the UV spectrum with our human eyes. We haven't evolved that way. But we do sometimes see in aquariums there might be an assistance of a UV light, and you can see some of our amazing coral reefs fluoresce under that UV light. And it's basically what a lot of our animals that can see into the UV spectrum might see out there on the reef. So it really is a beautiful, colourful place, not just for us, but for all the animals in between as well. And
It's got a bit of a video here.
yes. So this is a video that we took we were on the Coral Sea at Papua New Guinea here, and this is another type of clownfish, our orange fin anemone fish. You can see that it looks a little bit different in coloration here. You can see them skirting around the anemones, using it to shelter, and all the other fish just skirting around the edges, staying away from those stinging nematocysts in there. But very, very cool.
A lot of other fish would be very jealous of the clownfish. So,
Very jealous.
in fact, most fish, it's really cool actually working in an aquarium when we come in at night and you see most of the other reef fish, they're just sort of sheltering under rock corals or just any little crevice they can. And then you get to the clownfish tank, the anemone's still wide open and the clownfishes are there, laid, all of their fins splayed out, just absolutely chilling in the anemone. So if you were to be reincarnated as a fish, Nemo's your man. That'd be awesome. Well, Nemo is your man because they're all born male. So this is actually really interesting. So that was
Speaking of.
So the really cool thing about a lot of fish is their ability to actually change sex throughout their life. And clownfish have a really cool, complicated way of doing this. So every single clownfish is born a male. And they live in these groups in the anemone. So they'll live in groups, usually about 6 to 8. And there is only one female in that group, and she's the most dominant of the group. So there'll be one female, and then there'll be one breeding male. He'll be the second most dominant. If that female passes on, or she moves on from that group, that male, the most dominant male, will then turn into the female. And then the juvenile, the next biggest juvenile, he'll turn into the breeding male, which is actually really cool. So it's all done on size. So much so that those juvenile clownfish, even if they're 3, 4, 5 years old, they will actually stunt their growth, so they're actually still in that juvenile stage until the opportunity arises for them potentially to be the breeding male. Then within a month or so, they will nearly double in size and weight and grow past that to be able to become that male. And then if they were to one day become the dominant female in the anemone, they'll do that again. They'll double in growth as well, which is really cool. And it's pretty amazing that fish can actually do this. So we'll be talking about fish that can actually continuously change from boys to girls as well in the next lecture. So it is amazing what these fish can get up to. But it is the boys that do guard the eggs, and all the juveniles help out as well. So it is pretty cool. I just want to have a quick talk about some of the variation. So Nemo, or the Ocellaris clownfish, across its pretty wide distribution, is orange and white, except in one place, and that is the place that we are from. And it's really weird. So only in Darwin Harbour is Nemo black and white. But it's really strange because Darwin Harbour, even on the map there, that's the whole map of the Northern Territory we're from. Darwin Harbour is only one tiny little circle of it. You can't even point it with this laser. It's this tiny thing there. But the rest of the sea here in the Northern Territory, they're orange and white. It's only in the harbour that they're black and white. So they were thought to be a different species for a while, but they are turned out to be the same, Ocellaris clownfish, which is pretty interesting. So a lot of weird stuff happens with fish. You can see why they are hard to study when they're doing stuff like this. Now one of everyone's favourite. So we have Dory. So she's our regal blue tang. So we'll have a bit of a chat about her. So contrary to the movie, fish do actually have great memories. So much so, most reef fish are like tanks. They can actually remember food routes and sounds for up to several months, which is pretty amazing. So they are pretty smart fish. So yeah, so like most reef fish, tanks can actually remember food routes and sounds for several months. I didn't I? Sorry. I'm getting a bit of Dory syndrome. But one thing I did want to have a chat about with Dory is that it's a good thing to talk about names with fish. So I called it the blue tang at the start, which is actually a bit of a mistake. They are the regal tang, royal blue tang, or the pallet tang. And that is because there is a species in the Atlantic Ocean. These are only found in the Indo-Pacific. Species in the Atlantic Ocean, which is very different genus. It is completely blue, that people call the blue tang. And that's why us as scientists like to use Latin names. So we'll chat a bit about Latin or scientific names on our next presentation. But on the top right there is the name. So Paracanthurus hepatus is the name, and it is a monotypic genus, which means it is the only species found in that genus. So it's unique enough, this fish, to be not very closely related to other types of tangs or surgeonfish, which is pretty interesting. Now it is a surgeonfish, so tangs are surgeonfish, and they can actually cut. So pretty amazing. They've got these caudal spines at the end here that they will actually extend if they're in a situation that they feel like they're going to be predated on. I have got sliced by surgeonfish before. It is very sharp when we've had to move them out of tanks. Sometimes if not careful, you can get sliced with their scalpels, and it hurts, and it is so sharp. It's quite amazing how clean the cut can be. So that's why they're called surgeonfish. So again, like most of our reef fish, they're living in groups. It helps protect them. And again, you can see feeding on mainly algae and plankton. So they are beautiful fish. So yeah, so contrary to the movie, fish do have great memories.
You're doing it again.
We've done it again, haven't we? Let's just move on from Dory. I'll tell you what, you keep popping up and...
from short-term memory loss. We're going to head into now Bruce, who of course, or should I say, as an Australian, Bruce. And he's a great white shark. That's not how I normally sound. You can hear me from a mile away, that twang, I'm absolutely sure. But as he says himself, he is not just a mindless killer. Absolutely not. So he's one of the friends of the fish, of course, or he tries to be. He's a part of the vegetarian community. And I take my hat off to anyone who tries to better themselves, that's for sure. But, you know, he falters, he slips sometimes. So our great white sharks are the largest predatory fish on Earth. And yes, our sharks are fish. They're a type of elasmobranch there. And they're cartilaginous too, so that means they don't have the same bone like you and I do as a part of our main structures, which means they're lighter in the water, they're more buoyant, and you need that when you need to be a fast predator in our great ocean. Now, they're enormous, as we all know. Has anybody seen a great white shark before? You have? Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
Chills down your spine. They are absolutely incredible apex predators, very important to our ecosystems. And in particular for regulating population health of some of their prey items for a range of different reasons. Now, like I said, they are very big, with the largest female measured to be 5.83 metres in length and 2,000 kilos. And if you see just behind Nick here, he is a scale of a 6-foot male scuba diver next to our great white sharks there, and they're incredible. So they breathe obviously through the gills that they've got there. They don't come up for air, they're cold-blooded, and they have incredible senses.
Have we heard of megalodon before? That big shark that was pretty recently extinct. So probably about the size of a whale shark. So imagine all this animal the size of a whale shark that was able to even more be faster than this shark too, which is pretty crazy. But they were said that great white sharks, because they've been a species a long time, they lived alongside megalodon, actually sort of slowly outcompeted megalodon as prey started to get smaller, which is pretty crazy to think about. So people do find megalodon teeth quite often. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, one thing I find really impressive about sharks is just basically their dentition here, or the way that their teeth are structured. So luckily for Marlin and for Dory, fish are friends, not food of course, but great whites have 28 exposed teeth on the front row at the top, and they've also got 25 on the lower, but they have so many ready to go. Hundreds, thousands in their lifetimes, almost like a conveyor belt. And it's why people find things like shark teeth washed up on beaches so often. M4-size shark teeth, they're always going through them, they're always falling out. And you think about it, they don't really chew their food. They're more of a ripping action. They don't have the cutlery that you and I do. They don't have any hands to do anything with, so they need those really highly specialized teeth. And this is actually teeth here, this row of a lemon shark, which is predominantly very, very teethy in comparison to our great white, which you'll probably see on the next slide here.
And do you guys remember in the movie when Dory started bleeding and then all of a sudden Bruce wasn't a vegetarian anymore, all of a sudden? And that actually does happen in the wild too. So sharks can actually sense blood from a long way away when the current does push it along there. But a lot of the time, people get worried that if they're bleeding in the water, that shark's going to come. So sharks can actually sense human blood eventually, but they're not that interested in it since we're not their prey item. So if it is a species that the shark is interested in, obviously they might swim over, see if that animal, because they're great scavengers. So if that is a dead or dying animal, they will swim over, they will be interested. If it's a fish or a seal, something they like to eat. But a lot of the time for humans, they don't really like the taste of us, so we are pretty lucky. In fact, they actually interviewed a shark scientist on this, and he essentially just used it like everyone can smell a landfill or a dump, but it doesn't make you want to go in and eat it. So, I mean, it's a bit harsh. Not everyone wears Lynx Africa, but that's fair enough.
And so this is what the end that you don't want to be looking at, of course, when you're seeing a great white shark, but is impressive nonetheless. Like I say, they rip their prey into mouth-sized pieces to swallow as much as they can whole. They don't have the appendages that you and I do. But I just do want to say that in our open oceans, that's where our sharks live. They play a very important role. And for every one person that may unfortunately be attacked by a shark, about 2 million sharks are unfortunately killed in an array of different practices. And you're more likely to sort of be struck by lightning than eat a shark. We've all been eaten by a shark. We all hear that quite a lot. And it's true, we're definitely in their territory there, and they're incredible hunters. Now, if you have a look, in between their nostrils, you might see those blackheads. It almost makes you want to put a paw strip on it, of course, or a face mask. I know it's scratching an itch. I just really want to get in with some tweezers or something. But that's what they use to sense electromagnetic fields. They're really incredible at picking up on electrical pulses through the water, whether that may be to find prey or to move away from things, or in their communication. It is an absolutely valuable resource. And because they're part of the elasmobranch family, rays have it as well, which is incredible.
And yeah, one good instance using rays in Northern Australia, we have these giant freshwater rays, which is really cool, and they live in our really murky waters, and those waters are pretty much pitch black, but they're actually able to chase schools of fish, usually mullet, all the way up to the riverbank, beach them, and suck in as many as they can as they retreat back into the water. And they're able to do this in pitch black conditions thanks to those electroreceptors. So every time those fish move or even breathe, they give off a pulse that those rays, or sharks as well, are actually able to track. So they're able to hunt in pretty much pitch black conditions, which is absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, and with teeth like that, no need for a dentist, of course. Just thought I'd slip that one in there. But the sharks aren't lonely, absolutely not. Just like our pumba from yesterday, if you remember from the last one, except not with the same birds. Instead, we have remoras under the sea. And they do very much the same job. They hitch a ride. They've got a pretty good life. You see they've got that sort of non-slip padding on the top there, and if it's not patented for footwear, it should be. Take that home, have a look at. That's someone's $1 million idea for sure. Buy prospecting there. And they've got a symbiotic relationship with the sharks there too, and that they hitch along for a ride and they eat a lot of the parasites off sharks as well. So it's a really cool mutualistic relationship, and sometimes, yeah, you don't find sharks alone.
So we've got gill, so we've got our Moorish Ardle. So one of the most iconic fish in the sea. And this is what we really love about Disney, and we love about Disney's movies with animals, is they raise the profile of some of these fish, which is really exciting. So the Moorish Ardle is a really awesome fish. So it's so unique that it's in its own family called Zanclidae, which is really cool. Now, you can see they've got that long mouth here, and I did actually have a photo of a preserved specimen to show you the teeth, but it just looked so weird and a bit ugly. I didn't want to actually put it in this slide, but they feed on sponges, so similar to corals, but they're much more soft, and they actually use their specialized teeth to actually scrape along rocks to actually be able to get sponges off, which is pretty amazing. So they often only live in pairs or in small groups, and they're not very well suited to captivity. Now, because of Finding Nemo raising the popularity of some of these fish, a lot of Mauritius otters have been collected for the pet trade. We will talk about this a bit later on, but unfortunately, they're not very well suited to captivity like a lot of our reef fish. So a lot of places can keep them, in public aquariums especially, because you do need a very, very large tank system and filtration system to keep these fish alive. And it's mainly got to do with their very, very restrictive diet as well, because things like sponges are almost impossible to keep in captivity. So it does make them very hard. Now, whilst they often only live in pairs, I'll show you a really cool event that happens in Micronesia every year, and that is a spawning aggregation of Mauritius otters. It's really cool. So we've Googled some pretty cool photos of this, so you'd be very, very lucky if you ever did get to see something like this one day. And what they do is called blue water spawning, which actually quite a few reef fish, especially a lot of our snappers, do. So these reef fish are pretty safe at home in their shallow reefs. There's lots of rocks, there's lots of corals, and they can dart instantly into those areas if any predators come, like sharks. But when they're doing this, they're risking it all. So that's why they want to have safety in numbers. Essentially, these fish are swimming out of the ledge, like on Nemo as well. Most coral reefs have that big, beautiful ledge that goes out into the open ocean. And they need to swim out into that blue water and swim to the top to spawn. So it gives them, lots of things like sharks are waiting. So at their time, they're going to be the most vulnerable in their life. So that's why they wait and gather in these hundreds and hundreds. And people who have dived have actually said they've sat and waited for hours watching this cool interaction. And they'll literally wait until they think there's enough numbers. Then they'll all together rush out off the ledge, up to the top of the ocean, spawn, and then they'll try and rush back to the reef. So pretty amazing. So unfortunately, a lot do get taken by sharks, but as brutal as it sounds, as long as they get their job of spawning and breeding done, then that's what a lot of these fish are sort of reaching maturity for. But a really cool thing to see, and they've only just recently learnt about this. Because a really cool thing about a lot of our reef fish is their pelagic larval stages. So even some of the biggest fish in the world, you'd be shocked how small they start when they start their pelagic life. So a matter of millimeters. In the open ocean, all that open ocean that's hitting the sun, there is billions of planktons and all these little microfauna that me and you had no hope of seeing, even under a microscope sometimes. So it is the perfect feeding grounds for baby larval fish. So Mauritius otter is pretty unique because it stays as a juvenile in its juvenile form for quite a long time to a large size, so it can come up to 7 centimeters in its larval stage. You can see it looks pretty amazing. You've still got that massive fin filament at the top there, but when they first hatch out, they would be microscopic, which is cool, and they grow pretty quickly in that water column. And then when they get to about this size, then they'll quickly transition into their adult form, their adult colours. They'll make their way back to the reef. So during this time, obviously, more than 99% of these fish won't make it, but it is pretty cool that some do get to go back to the reef that their parents are from.
It's a hard life out there for a fish, absolutely. It's very dangerous for a lot of them. But moving on to one of the teachers of Nemo, of course, which is of course our spotted eagle ray, Mr. Ray. Very inventive with our names here. Very anatomically correct as well. Well done, Disney. Looks perfect like that. And he's one of the most lovable characters of the reef there too. So they can grow really large, and they call the wingspan of these, because each side of the ray, they call them like their wingtips, their wings. So from wingtip to wingtip, they can be quite large. They can weigh over about 200 kilos, which is enormous. So 3 meters wide, 200 kilos, and sometimes you might see them all together, or even jumping up out of the water. And they can do that for a variety of reasons. It looks pretty spectacular, and it catches a lot of people off guard. You could just be out fishing, and then all of a sudden, heaps of them jumping out of the water and sucking back down. And you go, oh my goodness, what was that? They do it for communication, to avoid predation, and as well to get rid of parasites. They might not have those amazing remoras on them in such the way that the sharks do, but they can use that force to try and rip out the parasites that might have got attached to them. They don't have these lovely hands to swat anything away. And they use specialized teeth. They have really quite incredible crushing teeth. They're usually hunting on the floor of the ocean there. They're picking up things like crustaceans and crabs. I don't know if you've tried to break into a crab even at the buffet here. Very hard, very hard. I've tried, I could never do it. And when they breed as well, very, very cute. Their baby or their young are called pups. And they look like little chocolate chip pancakes like you see at the buffet here too. They're about that size as well. Absolutely adorable.
One really cool thing, so in the Nemo, Mr. Ray does talk about the ray migration. So whilst ray migrations aren't very common or don't actually often really happen along the east coast of Australia, where Finding Nemo is based off, there is an enormous ray migration that does happen in Mexico. So again, it just would be an absolutely amazing thing to visit. So there is quite a few dive institutions and expedition teams that can take you on this one day if you do go to Mexico, which looks pretty amazing to do. But yeah, tens of thousands of these rays. These ones are called mobulas. So there is quite a few different species of these rays that have that similar triangular shape to the eagle rays. But yeah, tens of thousands of these. If you can see this photo just behind me here, those are all rays. It was the same expedition crew taking that with a drone, which is quite phenomenal. Again, mainly doing it to breed and to reach different feeding grounds as well. So one of the most amazing things I reckon you could ever see is that. But that is what Mr. Ray was referencing when he was talking about ray migrations in the movie, which I think he actually goes off onto as well. Now, Nigel, the pelican, a very Australian name actually. Nigel, Nige, chuck a few shrimps on the barbie. So pretty classic Aussie name. But a bit of a mistaken identity from Disney. They did do very well with all the characters, extremely well. But they've made old Nigel look like a brown pelican, which is American species. But he's portrayed as an Australian pelican, which is, as you can see, very different colours. So Australian pelican is an amazing animal, and we get them everywhere at home, don't we?
Absolutely everywhere, and they're pretty impressive as well. They're very gluttonous, which means their eyes are big, their stomachs are even bigger. Anything that can fit in this beak here, they've got that large skin sac underneath too, because they're usually gulping up whatever they're taking, but with a bit of water too. So it's very stretchy material there. And whatever can fit through their throats from there, they will pretty much eat. We're talking things like baby turtles, large fish, even other birds. And very unfortunately for one sad beachgoer, there has been a reported case of a chihuahua. I'm very sorry to tell you. Anything that will fit down there, unfortunately, it's not commonplace, but it has been said to have happened.
They're pretty amazing. So they've got the largest bill or beak of any bird in the entire world at 50 centimetres. So it is pretty big, like Lucy said. And for such a heavy-looking bird, it is quite amazing how easily they float. So they do have hollow bones, and they have all these air pockets under their skin as well that do help them float. So it's pretty amazing seeing them being so buoyant for such a big, heavy-looking bird. So quite amazingly adapted. They do have these oil glands as well, and you can see actually see that hook on the edge of their beaks there. So that hook is for them to actually open up the oil glands at the base of their feathers, and then they'll actually spread that oil all across their wings, and it keeps them actually waterproof, so they can just be on the water all day. So you often see pelicans preening themselves, just wipe themselves with that oil gland they have, which is pretty amazing.
And of course we have Jacques as well, the skunk cleaner shrimp, and he's pretty impressively coloured.
He looks like he'd cook a mean pasta, doesn't he? Pretty fancy looking dude. So pretty amazing. I'm not too sure what dental care is like in all the countries you guys are from, but if you did move under the sea to a coral reef near you, you'd have free dental care, which is pretty amazing. So these skunk cleaner shrimps do an amazing job, have a completely symbiotic relationship with all the fish. They'll be cleaning their teeth. So they'll be opening their mouths and cleaning out all the parasites in other fish's mouth, which is pretty amazing. So much so that, you might have heard of this before, which is pretty cool, they will actually organise cleaning stations. So not just these shrimps, but there's a few other species of fish that actual job is to remove parasites as well, one called a cleaner wrasse. And they will actually create these cleaning stations. And when other fish swim by, they know what those stations are. And if a shrimp is available for service, he'll actually do this certain dance, letting that fish know that he's ready for service. And then that fish will come in, open their mouth, like this one here, and he'll get the parasites on and they move on. It's pretty amazing they form these little stations. And big fish like moray eels will just employ their own cleaner shrimp full time. And it's good for the shrimp too, because they've got the protection of this big scary eel, so not much else is mucking around with them. Very, very cool animals, these cleaner shrimps. Actually colourblind, so they don't actually get to see all the colourful fish that are around them, which is pretty amazing. And another cool thing about these shrimps is there is actually no pure female state of this shrimp. So they all hatch out as male, they go through a few molts, and then they can either molt again and turn male or female depending on what their mating partner is. And sometimes throughout their life they'll actually take turns in switching from boys to girls through the mating season, which is pretty interesting. So again, it's just so wacky what happens down there in the ocean. It's pretty amazing that these animals have actually evolved to be able to do that. So yeah, pretty handy fish if you are, pretty handy shrimp if you are a reef fish.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot going on underneath the ocean here. And of course, we've got bloat, our porcupine fish, but also called our pufferfish as well, which, there's a lot of common names, a lot of the same fish. And when you think about it, when there's natural predation events, you've got your fight or flight. We all know of that. We have our, we either run or we stay or we freeze. But in terms of porcupine fish here, they just float. They float away from their problems. It seems to work out pretty well for them. So that is their main defense, believe it or not. They've got pretty cool teeth, actually. They break into sea urchins, but their teeth are fused together like a beak, so it doesn't look like normal dentition. And like I said, when they're threatened, they can just take in air, or if they're not near the surface, water, and float away. And these spines are modified scales rather than hairs or anything like that. And they can be obviously quite spiky as per what they need to do. They need to look scary. All of a sudden, someone's coming to eat it. They all of a sudden look really scary and spiky. Hopefully something's going to back off.
They're pretty cool animals too, and they're able to so easily get into not just sea urchins, but things like mussels as well. It's pretty amazing to see a fish. Sometimes a mussel the same size as it, and actually just able to break in at the top of the shell with those beaks, which is pretty phenomenal. And all these fish have these different dentition, as Lucy mentioned yesterday, just to try and occupy different niches, trying to keep out of each other's way. There's so many things going on in the coral reef there, but there's also so many fish, and to keep out of each other's way, they all have to feed on different things that other fish can't feed on. So that's why they've all evolved this way. So the porcupine fish does a pretty good job of doing that. Got a big eye too, because they're nocturnal, so a lot of the time being around at night and they'll be able to see a lot of things. Now here's a cool fish. This is Gurgle, the royal grummer, one of the most beautiful fish. You see fish were actually, they're the original fashion designers. The purple suit, yellow pants, pretty amazing. Believe it or not, a lot of fish just do this for camouflage. So they actually, we think they stand out on a coral reef, but there's so much colour happening down the coral reef. It's very distracting for a lot of predators. So it is a good way. It's a camouflage. What's going on there? Now in the movie, Gurgle, if you remember, he's a complete germaphobe. So he always wanted pristine water. He's a very nervous fish. And the royal grammars are actually quite nervous fish in real life too. So a lot of people do have them in aquariums. One of the only reef fish that is actually able to be captive bred, which is actually really, really cool. But they're constantly living in and out of the rock crevices. These are tiny fish, only 4 or 5 centimetres. So they're very vulnerable to predation. So they always know how quickly to get in those tiny little rock crevices when they're not out feeding. And this is one of his most iconic quotes, the "Curse you, Aquascum!" One of the best quotes from Nemo. So this is pretty much the only time where he wasn't caring about pristine water, when the Aquascum ruined the plans for Nemo's escape.
And of course, we've got Crush as well, who is our green sea turtle. And green sea turtles have quite a large distribution, but these guys are pretty cool. They're almost like your typical surfer dude, bit of fin, bit of noggin, a bit of dude. They're riding the currents, they're riding the waves, and they're one of the most iconic, obviously, animals in our sea. And one of our most favourite too. I remember growing up, my favourite animal I always go to was, it's a turtle. Now, they're really cool. They can live for a really long time. So green sea turtles up to about 90 years, but there's other species like loggerheads, etc. that can go for much longer. Some up to about 150 years, which, they're very wise. They've got a really long life expectancy there. And a very varied diet too. Sometimes if you're snorkeling, you might see them grazing on grass meadows as well, which is probably your most optimum time to see them actually closer to shore as well. Even when you're in Hawaii, did anybody see any turtles? Yeah, a couple
awesome.
of you? Oh, excellent. It's a pretty special moment, that's for sure. But they'll also graze on things like jellyfish too. And so they probably wouldn't get a ticket into, was it SpongeBob's jellyfish?
Jellyfish meadows, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Kick them out.
Yeah, kick him out straight away. Be absolutely cleaning up.
So again, amazing. So we got, what is his name? Squirt, that was his name, the little green sea turtle in Nemo. So it's pretty amazing that these baby turtles, when they mature, can take quite a long time. But when they mature, even if they're on the other side of the world, they will make it all the way back to the same beach they were born on to lay their eggs. which is pretty phenomenal. The migrational routes that is ingrained in these animals' brains, we have still no idea how they do it, especially with some of the shorebirds too that will travel in North all the way to the bottom of Australia. We're not too sure how they do it, but it's pretty amazing. It does mean they're very vulnerable though, because we all love beaches, and a lot of our beaches now are quite developed, so it is quite sad. Lots and lots of turtles have lost their nesting sites. But the baby turtle, this baby turtle on the bottom right here, he has no idea about the adventure he's about to partake in. So it's probably, or definitely is the most dangerous time of their life. And when you're thinking about all the predators that would be eating baby turtles, you're thinking about the ones in the waters, all the fish. But a lot of the time, it's birds, lots of birds, even crabs will get them before they even hit the water. So most of the time, not even 5% of the baby turtles do survive that initial period. So they swim for 40 hours straight to get to deeper water. So they do such a good job, and this little journey here is so important for them, from the sand to the water. That's when they're building all their strength, building all their muscles in that tiny little journey to get to the water.
Very crucial time for them here. And this is a green sea turtle that we were fortunate to come across when we were in Papua New Guinea as well. That was just cruising along the edges of the reef here. You can see how effortlessly they glide along the water. Of course, this isn't a young one, not like Squirt. This one's very well developed, and they have no problem gliding through the water there. They was mostly feeding on seagrass meadows, but they don't just ride the waves, they also ride the currents. And if you remember from Nemo as well, specifically the East Australian current. And they'll use that to move in and out of migratory areas. It's a great way for them to journey through. Think of it as a superhighway, 8 lanes, beautiful, no traffic, off you go. You're going to be at your destination in no time. And that comes down from a lot of different cases, but a lot of different places rather. But for Nemo's journey, of course, from the Great Barrier Reef down to Sydney. Does anybody know the address that they go to in Sydney? Marlon and Dory do to try and find Nemo. I think. Well done. Well done. Okay. I don't want to give you any hints, but trivia question probably. So I hope you heard what everybody else said. I actually don't know what the trivia question is, so don't come for me. But I'm sure it's out there. And if you have a look at this visualization as well, so this is a visualization that was done by NASA, and it shows the ocean current systems, and they're really important, especially for our east coast in Australia. This one is. Because it helps regulate and bring warmer weather and patterns down to our east coast of Australia. In comes nutrients as well from other places, and it obviously provides that amazing journey for our animals like our turtles.
It's quite amazing to see how wide and how deep it is as well. So it is pretty amazing. One thing we want to quickly touch on before we finish off this presentation is Nemo and the pet trade. So like we said, a lot of people after the Finding Nemo movie, blue tang, or regal blue tangs, and clownfish, and all those iconic fish